This episode includes discussions about eating disorders, mental health struggles, and recovery. These topics may be sensitive or triggering for some listeners. Please take care while listening and reach out for support if needed.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story, they'll be waiting. For the haters, whoa.
Welcome back, everyone, to For The Hayters. Today, we're diving into a conversation about resilience, recovery, and the journey to self-love. Our guest was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa at 22 after years of struggling without even realizing she had an eating disorder. Her battle with anorexia began while she was in the Navy, navigating the stress of deployment and a toxic relationship. For years, control over food became a way to cope until she finally sought treatment and spent years working toward recovery. Now, as a mother of two, she's in a place where she not only loves her body, but has a healthy relationship with food, proving that healing is possible. Today, she's here to share her story, the challenges of recovery, and what she's learned about self-acceptance along the way. Let's get into it. Stephanie, welcome to For The Hayters.
Thank you.
Are we a little more relaxed?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
That's all we want here. Nice and easy. Let's start out. Can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about, your journey leading up to what we're here to talk about?
Yeah. I'm Stephanie, and I was born in a small town, born and raised in a small town, Sequim, Washington. Raised by my mom and my dad. They were never married, so I grew up in a split household. Had lots of stepsisters, stepbrothers growing up, but I have a full sister, and her and I are super close, and so we grew up together. Didn't have a normal childhood. Had what I would call a tumultuous childhood, and my dad was a Marine. He was really strict with things. My mom was on drugs a lot and all throughout my childhood. So it was rough going back and forth between that. And then went through high school, decided I was going to join the Navy because my dad told me, if you want to go to college, you got to pay for it yourself or join the military to help pay for it. So I was like, well, my dad was a Marine. I wanted to do something similar. He had cool stories, so I was like, I'll join the military. And he told me, I'll only sign, because I was 17. He's like, only sign if you join the Marines or the Navy. And I like the Navy uniform, so I went with the Navy. So yeah, I joined the Navy, did 4 years in that, and then got out so I could move on with my life, go to school, go to college. That got put on hold with having an eating disorder. So yeah. That's kind of my snippet
history
of
before.
Yeah.
And before that, obviously this all led to a huge part of your life and just that struggle that you needed to get over or not get over, just get through. But what was your understanding of eating disorders before?
Before I was diagnosed, I didn't really know too much about eating disorders. I thought it was like something famous people, rich people, like that wasn't in my realm of reality. Nobody talked about eating disorders, any problems with food, nothing. So I remember in health class learning, it was like 9th grade, I remember learning about anorexia and bulimia. And I was just like, oh yeah, that's something you see on TV and in the magazines. So I never really thought about it. And that's all I learned. So I didn't really know too much about it at all.
And looking back now, were there any signs that were there?
Yeah. Now looking back, I'm like, oh, I recognize signs from like when I was like probably like 8 years old. I would use food as a way to try to control my my surroundings. When my dad had custody of us on the weekends, and when we would go to his house, he'd always take us out to breakfast on Saturdays. And this is where I really noticed it starting. And he always gets hangry. We give him crap for it now, but he usually would, like, him and I would get in an argument of some sorts. And he would be like, you need to apologize. As we're pulling into the restaurant, you need to apologize or you're not going in. And I'd be like, fine, I'm not going in. And I just sit in the car. He'd be like, if you're not saying sorry, you're sitting in the car. So I'd be like, all right. I'd be like, I'm sitting here. Like, cause that was my way of like, I'm not saying sorry, you know, like, and so I would do that. And I was like, okay, if I don't eat, then cause that was my punishment. If I didn't eat, then I was like, I had the final say, you know, I was like, I'm in control of this. So it started there. And then I noticed as I grew into like middle school, high school, if anything happened like that would make me nervous, scared, if anyone was upset with me or I was upset with somebody, it was like automatically I felt like, oh, I can't eat. And I don't know what it was. It was like the anxiety. And so I would just like, well, I'm not going to eat, you know? And, I don't know that. I don't know why. I don't know. Nobody taught me that besides my dad using that as a form of punishment. So
yeah, it's powerful to be able to recognize all the way back of kind of like that pinpoint and where it started.
Yeah.
Can you just explain what anorexia nervosa is, just in case someone listening might not know what it is?
So anorexia nervosa is when you restrict your calories. So you're trying to be in a deficit always. And it might look like, oh, I only eat these certain types of foods, or I only eat this amount of food. It varies between people, but it's always when you're at a deficit and you're trying to restrict your intake. Okay. So for me, it was restricting my intake, and as a way to purge my calories, I didn't have bulimia, but I would over-exercise. So it was like, oh, I need to exercise to make up for these calories that I ate, even though I was eating under, you know, so. Yeah,
that's really helpful. You mentioned before that obviously you joined the Navy, and you were in a toxic relationship when your eating disorder started. What was that period of your life like? What, you know, obviously all of this came to fruition, like, and recognized what was going on then.
Yeah. So I joined the Navy, right, fresh out of high school, and I ended my high school relationship and was just kind of doing my own thing, trying to be young and in the Navy, just figuring life out. And we went on my first deployment, and I became friends with this one guy who I worked with, and we ended up dating. And how we started hanging out was working out together. And because that's when you're on a ship, that's all you can do, you know, on your off time. And so we would work out together, and he was really big into fitness. And after like a couple months of us dating, I started noticing things like he would say, oh, we didn't work out enough to deserve this food, or that's too many calories. And I remember specifically one time we had it's called a ship store, and it's like a little convenience store on the ship. I bought a Capri Sun because I was like, I want to be a kid to have a Capri Sun. I brought him one, and he was like, that has too many calories in it. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, looked at the back of it. It's like one of those core memories. I was just like, what do you mean too many calories? And then I was like, oh, okay. So then I started that's when I started tracking my calories, trying to work out more to afford meals, you know? So he kind of set that in my head. And I mean, I would put money on it. He definitely had an eating disorder, but for guys, it's different. You know, nobody sees it as that. It's like, oh, you're so, you have such good self-control. And so, but I saw, you know, behind closed doors. And then once we got back from deployment, we were dating and serious. And so we got into apartment together. And that's when things just got really bad between us. He was very emotionally abusive, and he never hit me, but it was like, what's that called?
Like scare tactic?
Yes, just like that. And so, and growing up, coming from such a toxic childhood, I was like, oh, this is what love looks like. That he does this because he loves me, you know. And he would say, I love you, and stuff like that, and use that as a weapon of like, I love you, I don't want you to do this, or I love you, I want you to do XYZ. Like, he cut me off from all of my friends. Like, I had no friends that I used to have. And it was like, he started not making, but he'd be like, I don't want you to go see your family. I want you to stay here. And so like, he really isolated me from all of my important relationships, which when you have an eating disorder, you're already feeling isolated. So when you're taken from important people in your life, you feel more isolated. It's like, what do I turn to? Oh, I turn to controlling my food intake and working out, you know? So it was like, I felt like I had nothing else going for me besides I can just focus on this, so I don't pay attention to everywhere else in my life that's just going to crap.
And how long were you in that relationship for?
I think it was so we dated my first deployment, which was 2009, 2010. And then we went on another deployment, 2011 to 2012. And we dated until we both got out of the Navy. So it was like two and a half years.
And when was it in that relationship that you realized that, you know, your eating was something more serious than just, you know, how you had been going through life about it?
I didn't think it was my eating. I thought it was my commitment to working out. I feel like I was just so, I wouldn't say brainwashed, but I was just so lost in the sauce that I wasn't thinking of anything besides getting through the day. And I was like, okay, I'm going to wake up. Here's what I'm going to eat for breakfast. Here's what I start the day working out. And then, you know, I do my job, whatever. And then everything was planned out. So it was like very routine. And I had no idea that I had an eating disorder. I see it now. I'm like, oh yeah. And nobody said anything to me. Nobody questioned it. And so it was a year after that, after I got out of the Navy, when I was finally diagnosed. And I was like, the doctor asked me, I went to a doctor's appointment just for a physical, and she was like, all right, so tell me about your lifestyle. And she's like, you know, what do you do for keeping active? And I was telling her, and she's like, it sounds like you have an eating disorder. Have you ever been diagnosed? And I was like, what? And no, I don't. I enjoy working out and I enjoy watching what I eat. And she's like, to an extreme. And I was like, no. And then I went home and started researching it, and like all the signs, and like not being able to control yourself to stop working out, not being able to eat foods that you want to eat, you know, all these signs and symptoms. I was like, it was like my world just went woof. And I was like, I have an eating disorder. And then I was like, crap, what am I going to do about this?
And you said like no one in your life noticed or was concerned. No friends, colleagues. I guess, I mean, you just sitting here talking about it, I can think of a handful of people that are in that same boat that I've never once, I mean, I feel like I've even been in that boat before where I get hyper focused on, like I'll spit things out and be like, not worth the calories. Like,
exactly.
You know, so it's just interesting because, you know, I'm also blind and naive to this aspect of this eating disorder.
I feel like it's really not talked about enough, and people, you know, like you just said, don't know it's an issue. It's like our relationship as humans with food this day and age is just so skewed and just so unhealthy. You know, there's all these fad diets, there's all these weight loss things you can do. There's just, we're inundated with so much, and it's like, it's really not healthy how, as society, our relationship with food is. And it's just not talked about enough, you know, and people feel shamed about it. Like I didn't talk about how I had an eating disorder for so long. It wasn't until years after I was recovered that I started opening up to people. You know, they're like, oh, tell me about yourself. And I'd be like, oh, well, actually, you know, I'm recovered from an eating disorder. I mean, I wouldn't come out with that, you know, but
your icebreaker question,
right?
Your icebreaker answer.
2 truths and a lie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's sad because it's not talked enough about. talked about enough, but so many people deal with unhealthy relationships with food.
Yeah, I'm curious, and you know, I know that this isn't what we're necessarily here to talk about, but I think it's important as well. What was it inside of your relationship that you recognize that it was time to leave also, right? Like, I know that toxic relationships are something I'm pretty sure no one is a stranger to.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people are still in it. They don't find their way out. I've been in a couple toxic relationships. Luckily, I've found my way out as well. But that could even leave years of just like healing needed. So
Yeah. Leaving that relationship was kind of a mutual decision. We were just, the last deployment we were on, that deployment in itself was awful, but we just kept arguing, fighting, breaking up, getting back together. And I would be like, oh, well, if I do this, will you stay with me? And I remember one of them was, if I stop working out, will you stay with me? And he's like, I don't care about that. Like, but I was trying to plead with him for us to stay together, even though I didn't want to be with him, but at the end of our deployment, he was like, I'm going to move back home. And I was going to move back home. Right. And I was like, this needs to happen. But it was one of the hardest breakups because I think because I was going through so much and he stripped everyone away from me that I felt like I had nothing besides him. So I'm like, well, if I leave and go back home, I have no friends. I mean, I have my family, but like, I feel like I was starting over. So it was so hard that I kept going back and forth of, we should stay together. We shouldn't stay together. We should stay together. And, I had no other choice but to go home because I was out of the Navy. And so we both flew home. And I feel like if we were in the same area, like, because he was all the way in Texas and I was in Washington, if we were near each other, I would have probably tried harder to stay together, even though that would have been the worst thing that could have happened. I'm so thankful that I got out of it.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're in that toxic cycle, it's like you want out, but you feel like that's what, at the same time, you love the comfort of somebody being there. And so I'm glad that we had the space and the distance to finally like be done. Because I even knew when we first started dating that we shouldn't be together, but it was just
you always
like,
know, right?
Yeah,
It's
but
always there in your head.
Yeah. It was like the comfort of it. And like, I was 19 and like going on deployment, going to war. And I'm like, I don't know what we're doing. So I just wanted some type of comfort. So
yeah, I talk about it a lot in life and in general, just because I've come out of toxic relationships and I know people that are still in them, and I know people that struggle being in healthy relationships after toxic relationships because that chaos, that like discomfort and that that emotional overdrive is so related back to love for people in toxic relationships that when they're in a healthy relationship, those emotions are missing, right?
Yeah.
Like the fear, the over anxious, the overwhelming feeling,
the jealousy,
yeah,
all that.
jealousy.
Like,
yeah.
This isn't normal.
Yeah. And so we often leave a healthy relationship or push away a healthy relationship because we aren't like able to realize that difference. So yeah, it's just a really important conversation as well.
Absolutely.
So after everything, you're back home, you decided what like makes you decide to seek treatment. I know that your doctor kind of diagnosed you, which feels like a lot of people could look like in that situation and be like, what the fuck? Like, not me. Why? I don't even know why you would say that and like not take it as like too seriously.
At first I was offended.
Yeah.
I was like, you don't know me from Adam. Like, this is my first time seeing you and you're going to just give me a label. That's how it felt, And I was like, she doesn't know anything about me. So then, like I said, I went home and researched it and I was like, oh, she's spot on,
Yeah.
So I tried to change my mindset and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to start eating more, eating better, and working out less. And that did not work at all. I got worse and worse because I was overloading myself with school because I started school at that point. And I was like, all right, if I just change my focus on this school and not deal with my past and everything. Like I was ignoring just getting out of that breakup. I was ignoring everything that came with getting out of the Navy and, doing 2 deployments. I was ignoring all of that and trying to focus just on school, which made my eating disorder and overexercising way worse. So it wasn't until the following year that my sister was like, you need to do something about this. Like it's my sister, Brittany. She's like, you need to do something about this. Like, I'm scared for you. This is not okay. You're way underweight. You work out too much. It's cutting into our relationship. And she's like, you need to do something about it. So I was like, all right. So we got together and we're like, my aunt, she was really versed in like the medical world. And she was like, here's what we need to do. She got me set up into a treatment. It was an inpatient. And I went and I was there for a day and I was like, this is not for me. I don't have an eating disorder. All these other people are crazy. Sorry, not crazy, but all these other people.
I mean, at the time, valid feeling, right?
They got the problems. I don't, I'm out. So I left AMA. I mean, I signed the papers. I didn't just like hop, skip out of there, but went and I was like, I just need to live with my dad. He was a former Marine. He'll help whip me right into shape. That did not happen.
In my head, I'm
Spoiler.
like, that sounds like the worst possible decision.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it was the worst decision, but it was the best decision because it got me to then years later go to treatment and finally get into recovery. But
yeah. What was that residential treatment like?
The first one?
Yeah.
I was 23, I think, 22, 23. And there was a lot of like 18, 17, 16-year-olds. So I just felt very out of place. And I hadn't been familiar with talking about feelings and talking therapy and stuff. So it kind of like, I got scared.
A lot, all at once.
Yeah. I was like, and that's why I was like in denial. I was like, I don't got any problems. I'm just going to go home and I'll just start eating.
Yeah.
And that did not happen. So I moved back in with my dad and nothing changed. Everything just got worse. And
It's Kale.
Can I say hi?
Anywho, I don't even know where we left off, but I did want to, we were talking about the treatment. And so what role did therapy play, right? Like, when did you start looking into therapy as an option, whether it was specifically for this? Did you have any experience with therapy?
So after I got out of that residential treatment, I went and lived back home with my dad for 2 years. And after all of that, my sister Brittany was like, you got to do something. And I remember one day I was riding my bike because I couldn't run anymore because I was just so weak. So I'd ride my bike and I remember riding it and I'm like, I had this epiphany moment. I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Like I was trying to look a year from then and I was like, I don't want to do this. Like that was like my breaking point. I was like, I can't continue like this. I want to have a family. I want to have normal relationships. I want to have a normal life. And so that's when I was like, I need to really get a hold of my life and go to treatment. And I knew that outpatient therapy wasn't going to work. I was like, I need inpatient therapy because I'd already been kind of through it. But so I, found this place in Eugene, Oregon, and I signed myself up and my aunt took me there, same aunt that took me the first time. She's like, you better not leave this time. And so she took me and that's when I was like, I feel like I just fully surrendered. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't want to go back, you know? And so that's when I started accepting therapy and putting my all into it because I was like, I told myself I didn't have another choice. I was like, I'm not going to continue a life like this. So I was like, I have to do this.
Yeah, I think it's important to also recognize that it doesn't matter if you go and you fail, right? Like it doesn't matter if you try and you don't stay, like it shouldn't prevent you from trying again.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people think because, you know, rehab or whatever it is didn't work the first time that it's never going to work. And so you should be really proud of yourself that you allowed yourself to, you know, go, leave, have an awful experience, but then give it kind of another shot, because not everyone would do that, right? Like it takes a lot of strength to try something you hated again, just for your own well-being.
Well, and something that it's like, I've always said, having an eating disorder is like an addiction, you know, because you're addicted to having control and you're making everything exactly the way you want it. You know, it's like everything fits into this small little box. And when you have a drug addiction, it's like recovery from a drug addiction is you avoid, refrain, you're just like avoiding, you know, whatever your drug is, drugs, alcohol. With food, you can't do that. You have to learn how to have a healthy relationship with that. And that is so scary when you're coming from a place of that's the only thing you can control in your life. And so it's like, it feels like going into the unknown. And it was just so scary. And I was just like, I don't know what's going to happen. But I got to do it. And, you know, recovery, life, nothing's linear, you know, so there's lots of ups and downs. And I accepted that early because I was like, I'm just failing and getting a little better, failing more. So I'm like, I just got to throw in the towel and try something different.
Do you think, I have two questions. One is kind of taking us a little bit back, and I should have asked this previously, but do you think that there was any relation to being in the military that added to this?
Yeah, definitely, which I guess I didn't touch on that. So with being in the military, you know, I know the Navy's a little different because working out, physique, all that isn't like the high point of the Navy. They care, but so every 6 months or more or less, we would do, it was physical fitness tests, you know, it's like making sure you're still in shape and all that. They'd weigh you, they'd measure you, you'd have to do a run and all these different workouts, right? And I was like, I'm very competitive and I always wanted to do the best. Like I wanted to beat everybody around me. And so like that and always being weighed really fed into it. And I was like, oh, I could get a lower number. And I could score better. I can do more push-ups. I can do more sit-ups. I can run faster, you know, and people tell you, oh, you're doing so great. You have such good, you're so good at working out. You're so, what's the word? You're so dedicated and so strict with your diet. You eat so healthy and all this. And when they're really not seeing that, like, I'm overdoing it here and underdoing it here. So it's like they fed into it and reinforced the idea that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah, I'm like sitting here just thinking about how like what's the serotonin that you feel when someone's like, "Oh, you're looking good. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And then it's like, you know, an automatic, "Damn, I didn't eat that much this week. Should I just keep doing that so that I can continue to get this compliment to me?" And that's what you're chasing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and ironically, it feeds into that. You know, it's that feeling of, oh, what I did is right and got me this compliment, so I'm just going to keep going with it, you know?
Yeah, man, this conversation is just so important because it's outside the norm of what an eating disorder conversation is normally spoken about, and it's so much more, not to discredit other people's experiences, but at least for me, it's so much more relative in my mind because I've definitely experienced it, and I know people that have without understanding that it was even a thing. Like you knew it was, but I didn't realize that it is faced with like kind of the same like aspect of getting a diagnosis and needing to put attention to recover from that.
It's very prevalent in everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just women, it's also men. Like,
for sure.
I've been in treatment with men that have eating disorders. It's just not, I feel like it's along those lines of like the shame, and it's like they don't men don't, we're making progress with men talking about their feelings and all of that. So it's not as seen and diagnosed, you know.
Whole nother issue in itself. What setbacks did you talked about how it's not linear. What kind of setbacks did you face during your recovery? And how do you overcome those and continue to have such like a positive reinforcement of moving forward?
Well, I feel like my biggest setback was when I went to first residential treatment and leaving, and I just really declined from there. And then going to the second residential treatment 2 years after that, I had setbacks. I mean, I've had setbacks from then to now, but like during treatment is when my biggest setbacks were, which is the best place for them to happen, because I would residential treatment, you live at the facility, right? And you eat all your meals there. It's kind of like Big Brother, there's no cameras, but there's mental health workers that are there with you. So they're watching you, they're helping you. You can't really restrict your eating and you can't exercise, right? So once I got out of that, that's when I started having setbacks, when I was more on my own. I was in outpatient. So I'd go every day, but it was like kind of going to a job, and I would start restricting. And then I'd like go in and I'd tell my therapist, I'm like, oh, I didn't eat breakfast today. And he'd be like, oh, come on, Stephanie. And I'm like bawling and I'm like, I'm just going to fail. And he's like, no, this is part of recovery. You have to have setbacks, because if you're just like perfect the whole way, he's like, that's when we start to worry, because that you're going to fail. You're going to burn out. You're going to fail. You need to have these setbacks of restricting or over exercising. I had a workout plan that I was allowed to do, and it was a healthy workout plan, but I'd be like, I need to do more. And, we talk about that, and he'd be like, it's about how you go from your setbacks, how you recover from those setbacks. It's like, okay, you had them. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
So
how long were you there for?
I was in residential for 2 months, 3 months. And then I was in outpatient for like 4 months, which you just kind of start tapering down. I started after like the last month I was there, it was like I'd go once a week rather than every day. And then I ended up moving to Eugene, and that's where I lived for a long time.
Is there anyone that sticks out throughout your recovery, right? Like any people who really just made just a lasting impact for you, whether it's someone obvious, like a therapist at a rehab, or a friend or a colleague, who are those people that come to mind and how did they support you in the best way?
Besides like friends going through, recovery with friends, I still have a really good friend that we were in treatment together, and, we're now on the other side of it. She's big impact, but I feel like my therapist, my therapist and my nutritionist, they were very blunt with me, and like, they would tell me how it is. And that's what I need from a therapist. And things that they said and how they worked with me still sticks with me today. And they helped me feel human, normal, that I'm not a sickness, and they also were recovered from having an eating disorder. And I was like, before I went to treatment, I was like, I'll give this a shot, I know I don't want to go back, but I don't know if this is possible. Maybe I'll just learn how to cope with it, learn how to just get by. Because I didn't know, you don't hear about people, I'm recovered from an eating disorder. People just don't talk about this subject much. And so I went to treatment, and I was like, I remember one day with my nutritionist, I was just like crying, and I was like, I just don't see the point in this, because I feel like food's always going to have a hold of me. It's going to have a hold of me. And I was like, I'm never going to recover. Nobody recovers. And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I've never met somebody that has had an eating disorder or, any of that. And she's like, I used to have an eating disorder and I'm recovered. And I'm like, what? I'm like, for real, like real life.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. And then my therapist told me the same thing. I was like, you guys could have led with this. Like, hey, I'm your therapist. I used to have an eating disorder and I'm recovered, cause it gave me hope. Like, oh, this is possible. Like I can have a normal life after this, there's a future for me.
Yeah, I think that, that alone is what this platform is built off of, right? It's shedding light to topics and sharing stories to allow others that might be struggling with it out there, that you can give hope to, that like it is possible to recover. What were the major aspects, and it could just be as simple as, going to the program, going to therapy. What were the major aspects for you that helped you get through this?
I feel like the consistency of going, that helped. There was lots of groups, like talk. We did so much therapy. It was like you were therapied out by the time you were done, but it was so relieving. It's like, when you need to cry, but you can't cry, and then you finally cry, and it's like, oh, it's like a weight lifted off. It was like that every day. It was like you were making progress every day, little steps at a time. And the community that you built, the relationships that you built with people, for me, I'm a people person, and relationships have been what have helped me heal, I feel like. Besides, behavior modifications and learning how to have a healthy relationship with food, it's relationships with people, meaningful, significant relationships with people is what has healed me.
And healthy relationships.
Yeah, healthy relationships. Surrounding yourself with positive people in your life that want the best for you, you want the best for them. And yeah.
So I speak about that just often in life too. Like I'm so blessed and so privileged. I have the best people surrounding me, emotionally aware people that are striving for more, not like a toxic kind of relationship at all. And I give credit to that for just who I am today. And it's such an important factor. Like if you surround yourself with toxic people, if you surround yourself with negative people, if you surround yourself, and not even career wise, like someone can be struggling with their career. That's fine. As long as they're like, having some type of purpose put out there, that your circle, like you are who you
surround
sit
yourself
around.
with. Yeah. Well, and with an eating disorder, it's so isolating. You isolate yourself from everybody because you don't want other people to know what you're doing. It's like a lot of things you do kind of in secret because that's how you maintain an eating disorder. And so being around people, sharing meals with people, we bond over food. It's a very healthy thing to do. And so having those relationships has helped me stay in recovery. I feel like.
How do you feel someone around you can best support you, right? Like, is it something that's talked about? Is it something that's made aware of? I guess every person is going to be different, but for you, right, what does that support look like? Is it recognizing? Is it avoiding the conversation?
Definitely not avoiding it, because not giving voice to it gives it power. And so when I have different points in my life when I've struggled. After I had my first daughter, I had really bad postpartum depression and anxiety. And I was like, could not make myself eat. And my sister was like, I'm so afraid that this is going to set you back into having an eating disorder. And I was like, I appreciate her checking in like that and saying it as it is. Like, I'm afraid about this. And it's happened, time and time again, things come up and she's like, is this because, and I'm like, no, like that's not even on my radar. Like I'm not worried about it. But the checking in and the bluntness is what I need. Not everybody needs that, but that's what works for me because I'm not a liar. I can't lie worth nothing. And so if you ask me, is this becoming a problem? I'm going to tell you, like, yeah. So my sister definitely has been my number one supporter, and
shout out to your sister.
Yeah. Shout out Brittany. Oh yeah, Sebastian's
Shout out
mom.
to Sebastian too.
But yeah, I'm recovered because of me, but she is my biggest supporter.
I love that. Shout out to the people in our lives that get us through the worst times, because I sure as shit wouldn't be sitting here without some of those people. So
Yeah.
you just brought up your daughter, and you now have 2 daughters. How has this experience shaped the way you approach body image and self-love in general?
I feel like it doesn't matter if I have a daughter or a son. I think I would approach it the same way, where we don't use labels. We don't use words like, I don't want to say them. Like, I won't be like, oh, your thighs are looking this way or that way. Like, we don't speak about our bodies that way. It's like, my body is used to get me from point A to point B. My body is used to help me do whatever. And you are beautiful because of who you are, not what your body is. I don't say words like, oh, that's junk food, or that, I say all foods are good food within moderation. We're not going to just eat a bunch of candy, but if you want one piece of candy, that's perfectly fine, And I don't say, oh, those are healthier foods. I try just not to use labels, because that can really stick in your mind. And it's like, oh, I can't eat that because that's not healthy. And I don't want my daughters to ever have a disordered view of food and with eating or body image. Try so hard to instill in them that you are beautiful because of who you are. Nothing besides how kind you are to other people, how you love, how you react to things. Just being a good person is what makes you beautiful. So
Preach on that. What does your relationship with food look like today, right? Like, what do things look like now?
I have a healthy relationship with food. I struggle some days. It's like, I call it an eating disorder voice. That's what I was taught in treatment. You have an eating disorder voice and a healthy voice. The eating disorder voice might not ever go away, but it's quiet, and your healthy voice overrides it. And so it's like, all people will be like, you want to go out to lunch? And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I just ate, I'm not that hungry. I could eat. And my eating disorder voice is like, you don't need food. But then my healthy voice is like, go have the fun with the relationships. Like, it doesn't matter. And so it always overrides everything. And I eat because I need food in life. I feel like I have a healthy relationship with food. I don't think about it too much. I don't put a lot of thought into it, because that's when I get myself into trouble. It's when I overthink it. So, I eat when I want to eat. I eat when I'm hungry. I snack a lot. I'm a big snacker. Food is great. I love food. I hope that answered your question.
No, that was great. You mentioned that before, that some days are harder than others. How do you handle the moments, when it's hard, and how do you compare that to how you used to handle it compared to now?
When days are hard, and it's usually when my anxiety is high, that's when I'm like, I just don't feel like eating, or my mind will just be racing, and I'm not thinking about eating, and I'll be like, I need to eat because I need to be a good example for my daughters. I don't ever want to go back to having an eating disorder. And I need fuel so I feel better, and not feeding myself is going to make me feel worse, because then you're low on energy, you're cranky, all that. But before, in the peak of my eating disorder, it'd be like, oh, that's not even an option. Like, I'm ignoring it, and I'm distracting myself and waiting as long as I possibly can till I have to eat. So it was like avoidance and distraction was what I would do before, where now I'm like, I'm gonna eat.
Well, I'm, just because it's fresh on my mind, I know that it will be a little bit different, but going through IVF afterwards with all the hormones and everything, it like completely changed my psyche with food. Like I was ravenous after like the hormones that were going through my body. All I wanted to do was eat. Was that something during your first pregnancy or either of your pregnancies that you had to like, that you struggled with at all, of just like I need to fuel my body for this baby, but is it eat it, like, you know?
I didn't experience that with my first daughter. I actually struggled I was like forcing myself to eat, trying to get as many calories in as I could, because breastfeeding takes a lot out of you. And I was always, you know, you're tired and you forget to eat. So I was trying to make up. But with my second daughter, when I was breastfeeding, I felt hungry all the time. And I wasn't thinking like, oh, I shouldn't have that. Like, where before I'd be like, no, you just ate like 5 minutes ago. It's like, if I'm hungry, I'm eating. And I know after a lot of therapy, I listen to my body. If your body's telling you it's hungry, it's because you need fuel. You need energy in your body. And learning to have a healthier relationship with food and learning that all foods are good foods within moderation, I feel like that's really changed my outlook on, okay, I'm going to be fine. You know, and I remember one thing my therapist told me that has stuck with me is one meal is not going to make you overweight, just the same as one meal is not going to make you lose 20 pounds. You know, it's like it's not so obscure, and you're not going to tip the scale one way or the other by missing one meal or eating one extra meal, you know? So that really helps me when I'm struggling. I'm like, it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. What do you think your biggest lesson is that you've learned through this journey? And I guess it could be multiple, because I feel like there's probably a lot, but
I feel like I have learned to have more compassion with myself. That's something I'm still working with, giving myself grace, because I'm always hard on myself and trying to strive to do better. But going through this process, I've learned that I just got to take it one day at a time. Like, I can't fix everything in one day. And I think it's also helped me have more compassion with other people and be able to understand that we all come from somewhere, and whatever happened to us at whatever point in our life has led us to where we are today and made us who we are today. And just because, what am I trying to say? I feel like it's helped me have more compassion for people and more patience with people, and be like, everybody has something, you know? So I try to not judge too early or too much with other people.
If you could talk to your younger self,
oh God, you're gonna make me cry.
if you could talk to her and tell her anything, like what would that conversation look like?
Oh geez, my therapist has never even asked me this. I would tell her that she is loved, and love is bigger than the people that have raised you, and you are stronger than. Gee, let me figure this out. What I'm trying
Take
to
your
say.
time.
Okay, I would tell her that she is loved, and that love is not transactional, and that she deserves more love than she thinks she does, and to put herself first. I'm going to think of a million other things I would want to tell my younger self, but I don't want to cry.
What's next for you, right? Like, where, you know, what is next on your journey? It seems like advocacy is in your future.
I love therapy. I love learning about why people are the way they are. I just graduated with my AA I went for psychology. And I'm going to get my bachelor's. I would like to be a therapist of some sort. I don't know yet, but I love talking to people. I love picking people's brains. I just love learning why people are the way they are and helping people understand that your reality now doesn't have to be your reality later. Because I feel like so many people think, oh, that's just the way life is. And it's like, no, you can make it, you can change it, you can make things different. You don't have to be stuck in the crap hole that you're in. So yeah, that's what my future I hope looks like.
It's funny because it's almost like a full circle moment for you to feel that way, because throughout this short time we've had together, you have voiced the impact that a therapist who has recovered has, that made a world of a difference to you. So maybe your life will be in a place that has helped you grow and has helped you become who you are today.
I would feel so not satisfied, but I would feel like beyond happy if I could just help one person recover from an eating disorder or from any mental health issue that they're having, to continue their life in the way they want to rather than what they think they're stuck in. I want to help people realize that there's the chance of recovery. Like, this is possible. I would love to help anybody that's struggling.
If there are a few words that you want to say, right, like to wrap things up, of what you want someone to take away from this episode, what is the most important thing that you want people to hear?
Recovery is possible. You got to put in the work, but it's very possible. You are your best advocate, and it is possible. You can do whatever you want with your life. And I mean, I feel like I'm a perfect example. I felt stuck, felt like there was no future for me, that's all I was going to do in life. But I took control of my life and I got what I wanted.
If you're comfortable with it, and if someone wants to reach you,
oh yeah.
what is the best and easiest way for you to be contacted?
I'm not going to put my phone number out there.
No. An email, social media, whatever you're comfortable with. Email's fine.
I'll say my Instagram, but honestly, I don't know what my handle is. I think do you know? Okay, I was going to say, I think I put it on a form or something. Yeah. Because if anybody has any questions or any advice or any resources, anything, any support, just needs a listening ear, I am more than willing.
So Stephanie's Instagram is Stephanie, STEPHANIE PO 80.
P080. Is that what it is?
Oh, yeah, PO.
Stephanie P080.
Oh, is it 0?
Uh-huh.
Oh,
I wouldn't have an O.
In my defense, it looks like an O here.
Oh, you're right.
But that's also my fault because I wrote this. So Stephanie P080.
Yep. That's me.
And I'll tag you in all things too when we release this, so they'll be able to find you that way. Anything before we go? Any last thoughts? I know that you just gave your final words, but sometime you can take a second to think, like anything you wish you would have said throughout this episode or talked about.
Yes. I was thinking about this. I had a very hard childhood, and had a hard time navigating my eating disorder with my father. But I give him a lot of credit because I feel like he was doing the best that he could. There's no handbook on how to navigate these things when your child's going through it. And he was figuring out life at the same time. So like, I don't want it to sound like I was like blaming my dad for anything, because I feel like he was just doing the best with what he knew he could, with what he had, so
yeah,
I
think it's important. I forget what it was. Oh, someone reached out to me via email. I forget if it was for this podcast or for Karma and Chaos, but they were just speaking through, they didn't have a relationship with their father, and then they met them, and they just recognized that some people like just aren't meant to play the roles that we expect them to, and that's not their fault. Like it's sometimes just not who they are, and if we kind of look at people and accept people for who they are and not put the expectations on that we want them to be, it'll be a little bit easier kind of navigating that relationship. Sometimes
you just got to meet people where they're at and not have expectations, because you don't want to get disappointed.
Yeah. Anything from you?
Anyone from the Sally?
Anything from Sally? Stephanie's mother-in-law is here, so.
I have a gag order
Sally.
from my son. Told what my mother thought.
He said she's going to be in the background just blurting out things the whole time.
Do you want to come over here and say something on this mic? You sure?
Now's your chance. This is her first time hearing my full story. Because I met my husband.
Yeah.
I met him well after I was recovered. And so he doesn't really, I mean, he's heard my story, but he doesn't know much about, what I went through. He didn't see any of it. So, and this is all. It's like I wasn't ready till I was ready. Nobody could have forced me.
No
that
one
would
can
have
save
done
it.
probably more damage, but I appreciate it.
I actually do want to ask before we go what your relationship is like now, right? Like, are you like, do you feel supported in that, in everything, right? In all aspects? Has this kind of changed the way that you love and changed the way that you all like accept things, right? Are you more like have a hard line drawn on certain challenges and aspects of relationships?
Are we talking about like
your current relationship,
my,
right?
My husband,
your husband.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Jason.
Shout out Jason.
I had never experienced in a romantic relationship what I feel like is like real unconditional love until I got with my husband. And he has always been so supportive. We've been through a lot with pregnancies and miscarriages and my mental health, and he's in the Army. So we've been through a lot, and he's always been there to really support me. And oh golly, I didn't think I'd cry. I've never, besides my sister, experienced somebody to just love you for who you are. If I'm struggling mentally, have anxiety, or when I was going through my postpartum depression, he never judged me. He never questioned anything. He's never made me feel like a bad mom because of it. And golly, it's refreshing to finally experience a love like that when I didn't grow up with that. I never was shown that deep of unconditional love. Wow. Why'd you make me cry?
But it's beautiful, right? Like it makes me, we just met. I've known you for a month, like of just conversation. It makes me really proud and happy from a stranger's perspective that you've gotten things in life that you deserve, right? Like, and that's another thing that you could tell your younger self, that, you do get like what you deserve. I mean, you have 2 beautiful girls. You have a beautiful relationship with a loving, supportive partner. Like, who would have ever thought that?
Yeah, it's great.
Stephanie, that makes me feel really good as a mother-in-law to hear that Jason is that supportive. And his dad is. I come from a very broken home. My husband is the youngest of 7 children. But when I met him, I was like, wait, how many fathers out there? And he's like, what? It's like, we're all from the same mother. Are they still together? I was like blown away because I had 6 stepfathers.
Told you she'd talk.
Never knew my girlfriend. So
Told
to
you
know
she
that my
did.
son is supportive,
I mean, that has to feel good.
it does feel good.
Yeah. I,
Such a damn brat growing up.
and in a world
He
where
knows it.
in a world where you often hear the stories of the other side, right?
Yeah.
Of men not supporting women, of men, creating just a world that a woman doesn't want to live in.
It makes them feel bad for having feelings, normal human
Yeah.
feelings.
And not for nothing, right? The stereotype of a man in the military, isn't always the best, right? That like they face the worst aspect of just the emotional awareness and emotional acceptance. So
And I think it's important that a person, especially your significant other or someone you're that close to, even if they don't understand what you're going through, they support you.
Yeah.
Even if they don't like what you're going through or like what you're doing, they'll support you and try to be like, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe I want to. Yeah. So,
Sally, you got a story of your own over there.
She
I can
really
tell.
does.
Well, maybe next time. You're up in Boston, right?
Yep. Just a hop, skipping away.
Yeah, not too far. I love it. Well, unfortunately, our time is coming to an end. I just want to. I'm going to read my outro. I like to write these out because it allows me to put the words in that I want to say. So,
Can I help you say you are not alone?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. It's the last, and so we'll get
Just
there.
remember.
Yeah.
You're not alone.
Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. Your honesty, strength, and resilience are truly inspiring. And I know so many listeners will see themselves in your story. Recovery is not a straight line, but hearing how you fought for yourself and found healing is a powerful reminder that it is possible. To anyone listening that might be struggling, please know that you're not alone and there's help and hope out there for you. Thank you for tuning in. If you connected with this episode, be sure to share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, we'll see you next time on For The Hayters. And always remember,
you are not alone.
Thanks, everyone.
I should have said you are not alone.
You are
Haters, for the haters, come on to it now or later. Yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story.